What happens when one of Hollywood's most intense actors sits down for what should be a routine morning show interview and instead delivers the most uncomfortable 7 minutes in live television history? The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife, and by the end, Tom Hardy wasn't just walking off set, he was being escorted out of the building. Before we get into what went down, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me which celebrity you think would handle this situation differently. Because what you're about to hear is absolutely wild. It started like any other Thursday morning at Good Morning America. The studio audience was buzzing with their usual pre-show energy, sipping their complimentary coffee, chatting about their excitement to see Tom Hardy in person. The production assistants were running through their final checks. Cameras were positioned perfectly, and George Stephanopoulos was reviewing his notes at the iconic desk. Tom Hardy was scheduled to promote his latest film, a gritty crime thriller that had already generated Oscar buzz. Everything seemed normal, routine even. But the moment Tom Hardy walked onto that set, something felt different. The studio audience erupted in applause as Tom made his entrance, dressed in a dark leather jacket and a simple black t-shirt, his trademark intensity radiating even in his walk. He didn't wave to the crowd. He didn't smile. He just moved across the stage with this focused, almost predatory energy that immediately shifted the atmosphere. George stood up to shake his hand, flashing that professional television smile he'd perfected over decades of broadcasting. But when Tom gripped his hand, George's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. Those who were paying close attention noticed it. The handshake lasted a beat too long, and there was something in Tom's eyes. Something that suggested this wasn't going to be the friendly promotional chat everyone expected. They both sat down, and George began with what seemed like a safe opening question. "Good morning, Tom. Thanks so much for being here. Your new film has been getting incredible reviews. Can you tell our audience what drew you to this particular role?" Standard stuff, right? The kind of question actors answer in their sleep. But Tom didn't answer right away. He just stared at George for what felt like an eternity, maybe 3 or 4 seconds, that stretched out uncomfortably. The studio audience shifted in their seats. Finally, Tom leaned back and said, "What drew me to it?" "You've seen the film, yeah?" George, clearly not expecting the question to be turned back on him, maintained his composure and said, "I have to admit, I haven't had the chance to see the full film yet, but I've seen the trailer and read the reviews." Tom's expression didn't change, but there was this flicker of something, disappointment maybe. Or was it contempt? He nodded slowly and said, "So you're asking me about something you haven't actually experienced? You're asking me to reduce a year of my life, all that work, into a soundbite for people who might not even care." George tried to laugh it off. That's what morning television is all about, giving people a taste of what to expect. But Tom wasn't having it. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, getting closer to George in a way that invaded the carefully maintained space of television interviews. That's the problem, though, isn't it? Everyone wants the taste. Nobody wants the meal. "You want me to sell this thing in 30 seconds so you can cut to a commercial about cereal or car insurance?" George, to his credit, didn't back down. He'd interviewed presidents, world leaders, some of the most difficult personalities on the planet. He wasn't going to be rattled by an actor, no matter how intense. "Tom, I understand you're passionate about your work, and that's admirable. But we have millions of viewers who are curious about you and your film. Isn't it worth sharing with them?" Tom sat back again, crossing his arms, and there was this long pause where you could hear someone in the audience cough. Then he said, "Curious about me, or curious about the version of me you've created in your questions. Because I read those notes in your hand, George, I saw them when I walked out. You've got questions about my personal life lined up, don't you? Things about my past, my relationships, things that have nothing to do with the film." George's expression tightened almost imperceptibly, but he maintained his professional demeanor. "Tom, our viewers are interested in you as a person, not just as an actor. That's what makes for compelling television." And that's when things really started to escalate. Tom uncrossed his arms and placed both hands flat on the armrests of his chair, like he was grounding himself for what he was about to say. "Compelling television," he repeated, his voice low and measured. "You mean intrusive television. You mean the kind of television where you dig into someone's private life, their struggles, their pain, and you package it up as entertainment. You think because I'm in films, because I'm in the public eye, that means I've surrendered my right to boundaries." George tried to interject, "Tom, that's not what I'm suggesting at all. But Tom raised a hand to stop him. You've been doing this a long time, George. You've sat in that chair and asked thousands of people thousands of questions. How many times have you asked something you knew would make them uncomfortable just because you knew it would get a reaction? How many times have you pushed because that's what your producers wanted, what the network wanted, what the ratings demanded? The tension in the studio was now undeniable. The audience had gone completely silent. Production staff were frozen, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let this play out. George, his jaw set, responded with carefully controlled words. Tom, I respect your feelings, but I think you're being unfair. We're not here to ambush you. We're here to have a conversation. Tom actually laughed at that, but there was no humor in it. A conversation, he said, shaking his head. This isn't a conversation, mate. A conversation happens between equals. This is an interrogation dressed up in nice lighting and a friendly set. You sit there with your questions, your agenda, your time limits, and I'm supposed to dance for you? That's not a conversation. That's a performance you're directing. George's composure was beginning to crack, just slightly. His voice took on a sharper edge when he replied, Tom, if you felt this strongly about the format, why did you agree to come on the show? Why are you here if it's so objectionable to you? Tom leaned forward again, and this time there was something almost dangerous in his proximity. Because, he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper, but somehow carrying through the entire studio, I wanted to see if anyone in this industry still has the guts to have a real moment. Everyone's so polished, so media-trained, so afraid of saying something that might trend for the wrong reasons. I wanted to see what happens when someone doesn't play along. And now we're finding out, aren't we? George, perhaps sensing that this had gone beyond salvaging, attempted to redirect. Why don't we take a quick break, and when we come back, we can talk about the actual film, the craftsmanship, the director's vision. But Tom was already reaching for his microphone pack, his fingers working at the clip on his jacket. Nah, I don't think so, George. I think we're done here. George's eyes widened slightly. Tom, we're live. We have millions of people watching. Tom stood up, pulling the microphone wire free and placing the pack on the chair. Yeah, and they just got something real for once. They got an actual human moment instead of another rehearsed interview where I pretend to be excited about promoting a film to people who are going to forget about it in a week. He started to walk away, but then turned back, and what he said next sent shockwaves through the studio. You know what the saddest part is? George. He used to be a real journalist. You used to ask questions that mattered, about politics, about power, about things that actually affect people's lives. And now look at you, asking actors about their favorite breakfast or what it was like to work with so-and-so. Don't you miss it? Don't you miss doing something that mattered? The look on George Stephanopoulos' face was something that would be analyzed and memmed and discussed for weeks to come. It was a mixture of anger, embarrassment, and something else. Something that looked almost like recognition of a truth he didn't want to acknowledge. George stood up from his desk, and when he spoke, his voice had lost all of its television polish. It was raw, genuinely angry. You don't get to walk onto my set and insult me, insult this show, insult what we do here. You think you're the first actor to feel precious about their privacy, their art. You're not special, Tom. You're just another celebrity who can't handle the basic requirements of promoting your own work. Tom stopped in his tracks and slowly turned back around. And there it was, the real George Stephanopoulos, not the carefully crafted television personality, but the man underneath. Tom actually smiled, but it was a grim smile. There you are, he said. That's the man I was looking for. Not the puppet reading questions off cards, but the actual human being who's capable of having a real reaction. See, that wasn't so hard, was it? But George wasn't backing down now. The floodgates had opened, and years of maintaining perfect professionalism in the face of difficult guests seemed to evaporate. You want real? Tom, here's real. You signed a contract to come here. Tom walked back toward the desk, not to sit down, but to stand directly across from George with only the desk between them. Yeah, they signed off on it, he said, his voice steady and cold. They signed off on it because this is how the machine works. You feed the machine feeds you. But what if I don't want to feed the machine anymore? What if I'm tired of pretending that any of this matters? George crossed his arms, mirroring Tom's defensive posture from earlier. Then quit, he shot back. If you hate it so much, If you're so above all of this, then stop making films. Stop taking the paychecks. Stop enjoying the fame and the accolades and all the benefits that come from this machine you claim to despise. But you won't do that, will you? Because you want it both ways. The audience was completely transfixed now. This had gone so far beyond a typical interview that nobody quite knew what to do. Cameras were still rolling. Producers were frantically talking into headsets, but nobody was cutting away. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. Horrible and uncomfortable, but impossible to look away from. Tom placed both hands on the desk and leaned in, his face now only a couple of feet from George's. "You're right," he said, and there was something almost confessional in his tone. "You're absolutely right. I do want it both ways. I want to make the films I want to make, work with the directors I respect, tell stories that mean something to me, and I don't want to have to sell my soul in the process. I don't want to sit on couches and pretend to be best friends with people I've never met. I don't want to answer the same 5 questions in 20 different studios. And I definitely don't want some bloke I don't know asking me about my childhood trauma like we're mates down at the pub." George didn't move, didn't back away from Tom's intensity. "Then you're in the wrong business," he said flatly. "This is the business. The film is 10% of it, maybe 20% if you're lucky. The rest is this, talking about it, selling it, making people care enough to buy a ticket. You can hate it all you want, but it's reality." Tom straightened up, and for a moment it looked like he might actually calm down, might acknowledge the truth in what George was saying. But then he shook his head. "No," he said. "No, that's not reality. That's what we've accepted as reality. That's what we've all agreed to pretend is normal. But it's not normal, George. It's not normal to wake up at 5 in the morning to sit in a makeup chair for an hour so you can look presentable enough to talk about pretending to be someone else for a living. It's not normal to have every word you say analyzed and dissected and turned into clickbait headlines. It's not normal, and we all know it's not normal. But we just keep doing it because nobody has the guts to say stop." George walked round the desk now, eliminating the barrier between them entirely. The two men stood face to face, and the energy in the studio had shifted into something almost primal. "You think you're the first person to figure this out?" George said, his voice rising. "You think you're the first actor, the first public figure, to realize that fame comes with a price. Everyone knows it, Tom. Everyone who's ever been in the public eye knows exactly what they're signing up for. The difference is, most people have the professionalism to honor their commitments." Instead of throwing a tantrum on live television, Tom's jaw clenched, and for a second it looked like he might actually throw a punch. The security personnel near the edges of the studio tensed up, ready to intervene if things got physical. But Tom didn't swing. Instead, he laughed again, that same humorless laugh. "A tantrum," he repeated. "That's what you're calling this. I'm having a tantrum because I refuse to play along with a system that treats human beings like products to be marketed and sold. Do you hear yourself, George? Do you hear how far you've drifted from whatever principles brought you into journalism in the first place?" And that's when George truly lost his cool. His face flushed red, and when he spoke, his voice was shaking with barely controlled rage. "Don't you dare lecture me about principles," he said, jabbing a finger toward Tom. "I've interviewed dictators. I've covered wars. I've asked questions that actually mattered to millions of people. And you dress up and pretend to be other people for a living. You play make-believe, and somehow you've convinced yourself that makes you more authentic than the rest of us. You're an actor, Tom. You're not a philosopher. You're not a revolutionary. You're just an actor who's too insecure to handle a simple morning show interview." The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just detonated. The studio audience gasped audibly. Production staff stood frozen, unsure whether they should intervene or document what was becoming television history. Tom's expression went completely blank, that mask of intensity falling away to reveal something else underneath, something harder and colder. "Insecure," he said quietly. "You think this is about insecurity?" George, clearly realizing he'd crossed a line but unable or unwilling to back down now, pressed forward. "What else would you call it? You can't handle answering a few questions. You can't handle the basic press requirements of your own career. So you lash out and try to make it about some grand philosophical point. It's textbook. Tom nodded slowly, processing this. And when he spoke again, his voice had dropped to that dangerous whisper again. "You want to talk about insecurity? Let's talk about insecurity. Let's talk about a man who used to work in the White House, who used to be in rooms where actual decisions got made. And now he sits behind a desk asking celebrities what they ate for breakfast. Let's talk about someone who traded relevance for a paycheck and a comfortable time slot. You call me insecure. But I'm not the one who sold out everything I believed in to become a corporate mouthpiece. George took a step closer, and now there were only inches between them. You don't know anything about my life, he hissed. You don't know anything about the choices I've made or why I made them. Tom met his gaze without flinching. And you don't know anything about mine, but that didn't stop you from making assumptions, did it? That didn't stop you from reducing me to some cliché about insecure actors. Here's the truth, George. I know exactly who I am and what I do. I make films. Some of them are good, some of them aren't, but I pour everything I have into them. Can you say the same about this? Can you honestly tell me that sitting in that chair, reading those questions, asking about people's favorite colors or their workout routines, can you tell me that fulfills you? For the first time since the confrontation began, George seemed to falter. His anger didn't disappear, but something shifted in his expression. Tom saw it and pressed on. That's what I thought. See, we're not so different, you and me. We both know we're part of a system that's broken, that doesn't serve anyone except the people at the top. The only difference is, I'm willing to say it out loud, George recovered quickly, his professional armor sliding back into place. And what does saying it out loud accomplish, Tom? What does this whole performance accomplish except making you feel superior for a few minutes? Tom shrugged, and there was genuine weariness in the gesture. Maybe nothing. Maybe you're right, and this is all pointless. But at least everyone watching knows that somewhere in here, he tapped his chest, I still give a damn about something real. Even if I don't know what to do about it. Even if I'm trapped in the same system I'm complaining about. At least I haven't completely numbed myself to how wrong it all is. George stared at him for a long moment, and the anger in his face had transformed into something more complex, something that looked almost like pity. You're exhausted, he said, and his voice had lost its sharp edge. This isn't about me or this show or the press circuit. You're burnt out, and you're taking it out on the nearest target. Tom blinked, seemingly caught off guard by the sudden shift in tone. Don't psychoanalyze me, he said, but there was less conviction in his voice now. I'm not, George replied. I'm just recognizing something I've seen before in a lot of people in this business. That moment when you realize the thing you love has become the thing that's destroying you, and you don't know how to walk away from it. Tom's shoulders sagged slightly, the aggressive posture finally breaking. Maybe, he admitted quietly, maybe you're not completely wrong about that. The studio had gone so quiet you could hear the hum of the cameras. This moment of vulnerability, coming after all the anger and accusations, somehow felt more intense than everything that had come before it. George seemed to sense an opportunity to de-escalate, to find some kind of resolution. Listen, he said, his voice almost gentle now. Why don't we sit back down, take a breath, and actually talk about your film? Not the promotional stuff, not the surface-level questions. Tell me what it's really about, what you were trying to say with it. Let's have that real conversation you wanted. But Tom shook his head. It's too late for that now, mate. We've already burned that bridge, haven't we? Besides, anything I say now, everyone watching will just be analyzing it through the lens of this disaster. That's all anyone will remember about today. Not the film, not whatever insights I might have shared, just this. George looked genuinely disappointed. That doesn't have to be true. We can salvage this. Tom gave him a sad smile. No, we can't. And honestly, maybe that's okay. Maybe this needed to happen. Maybe someone needed to stop playing pretend, even if it was messy and uncomfortable and probably career suicide. George extended his hand, a peace offering. For what it's worth, I hope your film does well. I mean that. Tom looked at the offered hand for a moment before shaking it. Thanks, he said. And for what it's worth, I hope you find your way back to asking questions that matter. I think you've still got it in you. They stood there, hands clasped, to men who'd just verbally torn each other apart, now sharing a moment of mutual respect, or at least mutual understanding. Then Tom released his grip, nodded once, and turned to walk off the set. But he didn't get far. A producer, a woman in her 40s with a headset and a clipboard, stepped into his path. Mr. Hardy, I need you to wait for a moment, she said firmly. Tom stopped, confused. Wait for what? We need to discuss what just happened, she replied. There are protocols when incidents occur during a live broadcast. Tom Tom's confusion turned to incredulity. Incidents. Is that what we're calling it? The producer's expression remained neutral and professional. Please wait in the green room. We'll send someone to speak with you shortly. Tom looked back at George, who was now being attended to by his own group of producers and assistants. Tom turned back to the producer and said flatly, I'm not waiting in any green room. I'm leaving. The producer's professional demeanor cracked slightly, revealing the stress underneath. Mr. Hardy, you can't just leave. There are legal considerations, broadcast standards we need to address. What just happened, that exchange, there will be consequences that need to be discussed. Tom tilted his head, genuinely curious now despite his desire to leave. Legal considerations. What are you going to do? Sue me for having an honest conversation? The producer glanced around nervously, aware that they were still potentially on camera, that microphones might still be picking up their conversation. That's exactly the kind of thing we need to discuss privately, she said, lowering her voice. But Tom wasn't budging. No, let's discuss it right here. Let's discuss it in front of everyone. You're worried about what I said, about how it makes the show look, about how it makes the network look. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Damage control. The producer's face hardened. Mr. Hardy, I'm asking you politely to come with me. If you refuse, I'll have no choice but to call security. Tom spread his arms wide in a gesture of mock surrender. Then call them. Let's add forcibly removing a guest to the list of memorable moments from today's broadcast. By now, George had finished with his huddle of producers and walked back over. Tom, just go with her, he said wearily. Talk to whoever you need to talk to, sign whatever you need to sign, and then you can leave. Don't make this worse than it already is. Tom looked at George with something approaching sympathy. Worse for who, George? Worse for me. My reputation's probably already in tatters. Worse for you. You handled yourself fine, better than fine actually. Or worse for them. He gestured broadly at the production staff, the network infrastructure surrounding them. Worse for the people who depend on everything running smoothly, on nobody rocking the boat too hard. George sighed deeply. Yes, worse for them. These people are just doing their jobs. Tom, they didn't sign up for this. They're not the enemy. Tom's expression softened slightly. You're right, he conceded. They're not the enemy. Nobody here is the enemy, really. That's what makes it all so bloody impossible. Another figure approached from the wings of the studio. A man in an expensive suit with the bearing of someone used to being in charge. He walked directly up to Tom with confidence that bordered on aggression. Mr. Hardy, I'm Richard Levinson, executive producer of Good Morning America. We need to have a conversation immediately. Tom sized him up quickly. Let me guess, you're going to tell me how disappointed you are, how unprofessional my behavior was, how I've violated the trust of your show and your network. Am I close? Richard's jaw tightened. You're not wrong, but that's only part of what we need to discuss. Your publicist is on the phone, your agent is on the phone, and our legal team needs to speak with you before you leave this building. Tom laughed, that same hollow laugh that had punctuated the entire disastrous interview. Of course they are. The machine must be protected at all costs. Richard took a step closer, lowering his voice, but not his intensity. You can be as cynical as you want about the machine, Mr. Hardy, but that machine is what allowed you to become famous enough that millions of people wanted to watch you this morning. That machine is what pays for the films you make, the creative freedom you enjoy. You benefit from it every single day. And then you have the audacity to come on my show and tear it down. Tom met his gaze evenly. Yeah, I do. Because someone has to. Someone has to point out that the emperor has no clothes, even if that someone is standing there naked himself. Richard shook his head in disgust. You're not a martyr. You're not a truth-teller. You're just another actor who couldn't handle a simple interview and decided to make it everyone else's problem. George, who had been standing silently through this exchange, suddenly spoke up. Richard, that's enough. Richard turned to him, surprised. Excuse me? George's voice was calm but firm. I said that's enough. What happened here today? That's between Tom and me. It got heated. We both said things. But it's done now. Let him leave. Richard's eyes widened. George, you can't be serious. After what he said to you, about you, on live television. George glanced at Tom, and something passed between them, an understanding that transcended the conflict. He's not wrong about everything, George said quietly. maybe not even wrong about most of it. The admission hung in the air like a confession. Richard looked between the two of them in disbelief. Are you both out of your minds? Do you understand what's happening on social media right now? This is already viral, already being clipped and shared and commented on. The network is in crisis mode. George turned to face Richard fully. Then let it be in crisis mode. Maybe that's not the worst thing. Maybe we've been too comfortable for too long. Richard's face went red. I can't believe what I'm hearing. From you of all people, George. You're supposed to be the professional, the steady hand. George smiled sadly. Maybe I'm tired of being the steady hand. Maybe Tom here just reminded me what it feels like to actually care about something beyond ratings and demographics. Tom watched this exchange with fascination, seeing the fractures in the system appear in real time. Richard, sensing he was losing control of the situation entirely, played his final card. Fine, if you want to leave, Mr. Hardy, leave. But understand that by walking out of here without addressing this properly, you're burning bridges. Not just with this show, but potentially with every major media outlet. You'll be labeled as difficult, as unstable. It will follow you. Tom nodded slowly. Yeah, probably. But here's the thing, Richard. I don't think I care anymore. I really don't. If refusing to play the game makes me difficult, then I'm difficult. If telling the truth makes me unstable, then I'm unstable. I can live with that. George stepped forward and extended his hand again. Good luck, Tom. I mean it. Whatever happens after this, I hope you figure out what you're looking for. Tom shook his hand firmly. Same to you, George. And for what it's worth, you gave as good as you got. That's more than most people can say. They released their grip, and Tom finally turned to leave. But the female producer from earlier, emboldened by Richard's presence, moved to block his path once more. Mr. Hardy, I really must insist, she began, but Tom gently but firmly moved past her. Sorry, love, but I've insisted on enough things today. Time for me to go. He walked toward the exit, his stride purposeful and unhurried. The studio audience, which had been silent and motionless for so long they seemed frozen, suddenly erupted. Half of them were applauding, actually standing and clapping as Tom made his exit. The other half sat in shocked silence, processing what they'd just witnessed. Tom didn't acknowledge the applause, didn't wave or smile. He just kept walking. Richard turned on George immediately. What the hell was that? You just completely undermined everything we're trying to do here. George removed his microphone pack calmly. What you're trying to do, Richard, not what I'm trying to do. Richard's mouth fell open. What does that mean? George looked at him with an expression that was tired but also somehow liberated. It means I think I'm done too. The words seemed to echo through the studio. Production staff stopped what they were doing. Camera operators looked up from their equipment. Even the remaining audience members leaned forward to hear better. Richard's voice dropped to a threatening whisper. George, think very carefully about what you're saying right now. Think about your contract, your legacy, everything you've built here. George nodded thoughtfully. I am thinking about it, Richard. That's the problem. I've been thinking about it for a while now, and Tom Hardy, of all people, just made me realize I've been thinking about the wrong things. I've been worried about contracts and legacy and protecting what I've built, but I haven't been worried about whether any of it actually matters. So what do you think? Was Tom Hardy right to call out the system, or did he cross a line? Could George Stephanopoulos have handled it differently? Or was his response exactly what the moment needed? Drop a comment below with your thoughts, and make sure you subscribe because conversations like this are exactly what we need more of in a world that's forgotten how to be real with each other.